The wind howled through the empty park, biting into her skin like invisible knives. Emma clutched her thin, worn-out blanket around her baby, trying to shield the tiny body from the November chill. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "It's okay. Lily, Mommy's here." The child's small cries pierced through the night, each sound echoing against the frozen benches and bare trees that surrounded them. The last train had gone. The last cafe had closed, and Emma was alone, shivering under the flickering light of a street lamp, her breath fogging in the air like smoke from a dying flame. She didn't know if she had the strength to keep going. But then, just as she was about to give up, a tall man in a dark suit stopped in front of her, and without a word, took off his expensive coat and wrapped it around her and her baby. "Broken heart, before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of unexpected moments that can change a life, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps us spread these stories of hope and humanity." Broken heart. Emma Parker was 26. Though her eyes told the story of someone who had lived far longer. Just a year ago, she had a warm apartment, a small job at a bookstore, and dreams of saving up for her daughter's future. But when her partner, David, left the moment she told him she was pregnant, her world cracked in half. Her parents had long passed away, and she had no one left to turn to. She worked as much as she could during her pregnancy, but when complications forced her to bed rest, she lost her job, then her apartment, and finally her sense of security. For months she had lived between shelters and the kindness of strangers, but as the city grew colder, so did people's hearts. That night she had come to the park because she was supposed to meet someone. A blind date. Her friend from the shelter had called it a kind man who volunteered at the hospital, someone who had heard about Emma's situation and wanted to help. But after waiting 2 hours, Emma realized he wasn't coming. Maybe he had changed his mind, or maybe he had just been another person who felt pity but didn't want to face the real weight of someone else's life. Her fingers were numb, her baby's tiny hands colder still. She pressed her lips to Lily's forehead, whispering prayers into the night, unsure if anyone was listening. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but the park felt like another world, quiet, forgotten. Emma thought about walking to the shelter across town, but the baby was already asleep, and the thought of the icy wind made her legs tremble. She tried to stay strong, to tell herself it was just one more night. Then she heard footsteps, steady, firm, approaching. Her heart raced. Was it danger? A police officer? Someone telling her to leave? When she looked up, she saw him, tall, in a black suit and polished shoes, a man who didn't belong in a park this late at night. His face was serious, but his eyes, there was something in them. Not pity, not curiosity. Something deeper. Without asking anything, he took off his long wool coat, stepped closer, and gently draped it over Emma and the sleeping baby. The warmth hit her instantly, like a rush of life flooding back into her veins. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled too much to form words. He crouched down, his voice low and calm. "You're freezing. There's a cafe 2 blocks away. Please, let me take you there." Emma hesitated. She had learned not to trust strangers, no matter how kind they seemed. But the sincerity in his voice broke through her fear. With quiet nod, she followed him. The man carried her bag, steadying her as they walked through the cold. When they reached the cafe, the staff looked at them in surprise, the well-dressed man and the young woman with a baby wrapped in his coat. He ordered hot tea, a bowl of soup, and a small cup of warm milk for the baby. As the steam rose, Emma felt her hands start to shake, not from the cold, but from the flood of emotions she had held back for too long. He sat across from her in silence, giving her space. Finally, he said softly, "I'm Noah. You don't need to explain anything. Just eat first." His voice carried a gentleness that disarmed her defenses. She nodded, tears spilling down as she took her first sip of soup. It was the first warm meal she'd had in days. Lily stirred slightly, then calmed again, as if she too could feel the change in the air. As the hours passed, Emma told him bits and pieces how she had once dreamed of being a teacher, how life had unraveled faster than she could fix it. Noah listened, not with the distant politeness of someone who wanted to feel good about helping, but with the quiet intensity of someone who truly cared. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When she finally said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make this your problem," he shook his head and said, "You didn't. You just reminded me why we're here, to help each other when the world forgets to." Noah wasn't what Emma expected. He worked for a law firm downtown, spent most of his days in meetings and phone calls, living a life of precision and control. But that night, he had gone for a walk to clear his head after losing an important case that had kept him awake for weeks. He had been doubting his own purpose, wondering if the work he did truly mattered. Seeing Emma in that park had stopped him cold. In that moment, his own worries seemed small compared to what he saw: a mother's courage against impossible odds. When the cafe closed, Noah offered to drive her to a shelter he knew, one run by a friend who could provide more stable help. Emma reluctantly agreed, and as they rode through the quiet streets, Lily sleeping in her arms, she stared out the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes like tiny promises. Noah looked at her through the rearview mirror, realizing he hadn't felt this protective of anyone in years. Days turned into weeks. Noah visited the shelter often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just checking in. Emma, still cautious, tried not to rely on him too much, but every time she saw him, a small part of her felt lighter. Slowly, she began volunteering at the same shelter, helping other women who were struggling. She found strength in giving back, in knowing she wasn't alone anymore. Noah's kindness wasn't just in what he gave, it was in how he believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. He helped her enroll in a short teaching program, covered some of the costs without making it feel like charity. "Consider it an investment," he said with a faint smile. "You're going to change lives." One evening, months later, Emma sat in that same park again, but this time, not alone. Lily, now stronger and always smiling, was wrapped warmly in her arms. The cherry trees had begun to bloom, and the air carried a soft scent of spring. Noah joined her, still in his suit, but with a softer expression than before. They sat in silence for a long while, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. "Do you ever think," Emma said quietly, "that maybe some people walk into your life not to stay, but to show you what love really means?" Noah smiled, his eyes glistening in the fading light. "And sometimes," he replied, "they stay anyway." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of everything words couldn't say. The sound of the wind through the trees, the soft laughter of a child, the unspoken gratitude that filled the space between them. Sparkling Heart, if this story touched your heart, if you believe small acts of kindness can change someone's entire world, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading these stories of love, empathy, and second chances. Sparkling Heart, before the story ends, take a moment to comment below, backhand index pointing right. Would you have done what Noah did that night? That night, as the park lights flickered on and fireflies began to dance in the twilight, Emma looked up at the man who had once been a stranger in a suit and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Noah shook his head gently. "You saved yourself, Emma. I just handed you my coat." She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Then maybe that's all it takes sometimes, a coat, a little warmth, and someone who cares enough to stop." The camera of life pulled back then, showing the park in full bloom, the same place where despair once lingered, now filled with a quiet glow of hope. A mother who once had nothing now had everything that truly mattered: safety, purpose, and love. And perhaps, somewhere in the soft breeze that moved through the trees, there was a silent reminder for everyone watching, that kindness, no matter how small, can rewrite the story of a life.